Hello, everyone. It is so nice to be here and joining you on Codementor to talk about what I actually think is a really important subject, which is both becoming and hiring second career developers. I often, when I think about this conversation, I think about this famous line from Robert Frost's poem that two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. This line feels very resonant for me because that describes my career path into technology and maybe describes a career path for many of you tonight or today as well. I started out life professionally as a rabbi, as a congregational community leader in various cities in the United States. I did that for about a decade. You might think that's a bit different from being a software developer, but we're going to talk about that. And I am now a developer. I work as a developer relations engineer at New Relic, and I've had various roles in the past 6 or so years. I started as a full stack developer at a financial company, and now I work in the space of developer relations. But my story, even in the past 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years, has become increasingly commonplace. That this story, if you start off in one journey professionally, and then you now end up in software or technology, is becoming increasingly conventional. And there's many reasons for that. And in fact, it's part of a larger trend that we are experiencing both in the States, but also globally, that people in the second career age bracket, which is typically around the ages of 30 to 45, certainly it could be younger and it could be older, are experiencing the greatest rates of resignation in years, with an average increase of more than 20% between 2020 and 2021. And it's only increased from 2021 to now in the midst of 2022. So people are moving jobs, and they're not just moving a job within the same sector, they're moving entirely into new sectors. And they're doing that for a whole host of reasons. In fact, so many Americans, and this is indicative and representative of people across the globe, are keen to switch their careers. And they're doing that because they want a new lifestyle, or because the career is no longer satisfactory, or they want more meaning in their lives. And people come into software for their own unique variety of reasons. We can actually talk about, sorry, let me just mute everyone. I think one of you got muted by mistake, unmuted. And we could talk about many reasons for why that might be. Software presents challenges to people daily on their job: intellectual stimulation, ability to learn new things all the time, constantly stay on your toes. It's a very diverse field of interesting problem sets to solve, constantly solving problems and riddles and quizzes and logic solutions. But there's another reason that people switch to technology, which I think we have to state, which is people in software earn a lot of money. And this is incredibly important, and we don't talk about this enough. People in software, on average in the States, earn about 3 times more than anyone else in America. And that rate is not so dissimilar from other places around the world as well. So the ability to earn a lot of money, exponentially more than anyone else, can be transformational for families, can be generationally transformational. You can help create futures for your families, for your children, for your parents, for your partners. You can take yourself into new heights. It is amazing what it can offer you as a potential. But when you come into the field for the first time, you can often feel like this poor little peg. You see everyone around you kind of gliding through so easily, so smoothly. And yet for you, you find yourself, no matter which way you pivot, which way you position, you just can't fit through. Everyone else is getting the job except for you. What's going on here? Well, that experience felt very much resonant for me when I was switching to technology. I was that peg, and I kept on trying to switch around. It took a while. I did finally land my first role, and then it's been a great journey since then. But that initial journey was really, really hard. So what we're going to talk about together are both the two parts of the conversation. We're going to touch on the challenges and opportunities for those of us who are looking for that role, those of us who want to be an employee, want to be an individual contributor on a team. And then we're going to talk about what it's the challenges and the opportunities for those who hold, in many ways, the power in this conversation, which is the hiring managers and the recruiters. So when it comes to us as the individual contributors looking for that job, there was a big research study done by Monster.com talking about second career phenomenon in general. And a lot of these things actually hold true, I think, for us in software as well, particularly. When you come into a new career for the first time, let's say you've been working for years in your first job and you have built up your success, you've risen the ladder, you come into that new job as a junior software developer. Depending where you were coming from previously, it might involve taking a significant pay cut initially. That's one area. The second thing is this really weird liminal state where you are both at the same time the most experienced person in the room and the least experienced person in the room. In one hand, you have all that work experience. You've dealt with toxic bosses, you've dealt with workplace conflicts, you might understand project management and how to deal with communication issues at work, and yet you are just starting out in your journey in software. You're just a budding new software developer. So you are the least experienced, right? And when a hiring manager or a recruiter is looking at your resume, at your CV, they don't know what to do with you. They're looking at this thing. They're like, well, is this a junior? Is this a career level? Is this senior? I don't know what to do with this. And so often, because they're inundated with so many CVs, they take that resume of yours or of mine and they chuck it because they don't understand. And you're left in this spot between both poles. And it can be really, really frustrating. And then once you land that job, this may feel familiar as well. You can be that 37-year-old career change junior software developer, and your manager, who is 15 years younger than you, takes you out for that intimate heart-to-heart, one-to-one conversation, and they want to understand what's going on in your life. And you're trying to explain to them, well, I made this career change, but I got a couple kids to support, and this mortgage bill keeps on coming up, and it's just been really challenging with the car payments, and but life has been hard recently. My parents are getting older, and I'm trying to balance between like my kids and my older parents, and they're just looking at you with their mouth like hanging way open, like, what is going on here? And that is, again, not always just a reflection of age. Sometimes you can have managers who are very wise, who are younger than you. I had one myself, and I learned a lot from that person. But when life experience and you're trying to negotiate, understand, and relate that to your manager, it can feel like you're from another planet and they just don't even understand what you're talking about. So there's quite a lot of challenges. So the first thing that I want to put forward to you when we're looking at this daunting list is that, in fact, your experience from your previous roles, they really, really matter. What you did previously is actually not your detracting point. It's actually your it's your boost. It's your benefit. It's your superpower. Your previous life experience is a superpower. But it's a question of how to change your CV, your resume, from being what is often a liability in front of hiring managers into an asset. And I think the way you do that is repositioning your previous experience to focus more on what you did and less on what you were called. So what do I mean by that? So what the problem with hiring managers is, and I happen to be a hiring manager right now, and I'm looking at resumes, and I get, for one open role, I have over 180 resumes coming in regularly. And I'm looking at these resumes, and I don't have a lot of time to look at these resumes. I don't have a lot of time in the day. And so I do a quick scan of them. And I try to be better because of my life experience, but I'm also a human being, right? We're all human beings, and we do the best we can do given our limitations. So if I'm a hiring manager, I'm looking through a resume, and I see a great emphasis and focus on your previous job titles, and you're connecting and applying for a role as a software engineer, I have to do the imaginative work to try and understand the connection between those previous life experiences, work experiences, and what you're applying for. Now, I try to do that, but most hiring managers don't try to do that. They don't have the time or the patience or the imaginative ability to take that leap. So do it for them. So for example, If you were a high school English teacher in your previous life, what did you do that's related to software development? You created individualized, measurable project sprints for 30 students every quarter. That's amazing. You were basically a project manager for a classroom of adolescents. Who could be better to do anything? You could basically run the world at that point if you could manage 30 adolescents and create sprint plans for them, right? If you were a bartender, you manage ongoing client relationships. In the life of being a software developer, sometimes the greatest challenge is not the technology, it's the interfacing between the technology side of the organization and the business side of the organization. Translating the business requirements into technological specifications, or working one-to-one with the clients if you're working at a consultancy or other kind of places like that. A bartender is the perfect encapsulation of that ability to translate client requests into something satisfactory and meaningful. If you were like me, a member of the clergy, you can list 1,000 things that you could relate to software. But for our case, I manage a diverse team of paid staff and volunteers. If I could motivate people who are doing it not for the money to come in every day and do meaningful work, then I think I can contribute a lot to bringing the team together around common goals and accomplishing things within the time frame of the sprint, right? So take what you did previously and think about the skills, the objectives, the things you accomplished, and translate that and abstract that into what applies to software. And put that explicitly in your resume. Don't count on the recruiter or the hiring manager to do that work for you. Do it for them. Now, all of this is to say that you are both, as we said, you're in that liminal spot where you're both one of the most experienced people on the team, but you're also one of the least experienced people on the team. So to understand and the idea to embrace humility, right? You need to be humble. I think the word humble, the word humility, is often not understood well enough and is often used synonymously with meekness. We need to become humble because of where we are and what we're coming into, but we also have to remember that humility is not a doormat. Humility and meekness are not the same thing. What's the difference? To be humble means to know what you know and to share what you know. And it's to also equally know what you don't know, and to be open and receptive to feedback and constructive criticism, and to be open and receptive to conversation and continual learning. Meekness is to know what you know and yet be afraid to share it. You don't want to open your mouth. You don't want to have a conversation. You don't want to be the voice in the room. Humility is owning what you know, being proud of it, but at the same time, being open to learning new things and recognizing, in fact, the bit of the paradox that the more you know in life, and as we get older, this becomes more and more true, the more you know in life, the less you know in life. And recognizing that ultimate kind of existential reality of the human condition. I often think of this wisdom teaching from my own tradition from the 19th century, where this teacher taught his disciples to always keep 2 pieces of paper in their pocket at all times. On one, they're instructed to write, "I am a speck of dust." And on the other, "The world was created for me." And at given times in different parts of the day, hold either one or the other or both, to keep in constant dialectical conversation in your own mind the idea that you are infinitely valuable and what you bring from your previous life experience matters deeply, while at the same time you have so much to learn, so many things that you don't know. And keeping those things in conversation with each other is actually the pursuit of humility. So all that's to say that one ought not to undersell yourself. Don't undervalue what you bring as a former sales manager, as a former bartender, as a former journalist, as a former whatever. Bring it with you, own it, and translate those skills so that the hiring manager or the recruiter doesn't have to translate it. Do the work for them. The second thing that often comes up often, that's a bit redundant, but that often comes up for new people into software, for second career developers, is what do you learn? When you're embarking on this journey initially, there is so much, and you want to learn the things that are going to get you in front of hiring managers and in front of jobs as fast and as productively as possible. There's so many languages, so many frameworks, so many, toolings, tool options, so many things you could possibly dive into. Do you spend all your time initially learning JavaScript, or how about Node, the front end or the back end? What about those new things like Rust and Elixir? But there's always Python and TypeScript. Do you want to become a front-end developer, a back-end developer, a full-stack developer, maybe a production engineer? Maybe you want to be in testing. Maybe who knows what you want to do? There's so many options. As Ryan says, maybe you want to learn algorithms and be a data scientist. There's so many things you could possibly do. It can be absolutely demotivating when you look at that list of areas to start out learning. So this list was demotivating for me as well when I first started, and I didn't know where to begin. But then I thought back to my seminary education, and I remembered something then too, that I had to learn this whole tome of stuff in a different language. It's things that were domain expertise that I didn't really understand, and I eventually acquired some level of mastery over them. But I did it by first focusing on the concepts over a specific thing. So in our context, applying the concepts of software development matters more than learning a specific language. Now, you'll have to learn the concepts through the avenue of a language. But if you focus on the concepts of coding more than on the syntax of language X or language Y, that will actually serve you a lot better. So if I were to stop you on the street, 1 a.m, we're walking down 42nd Street, and for some reason I see you and I say, this person looks like a software developer. And I stop you on the street and say to you, can you tell me what this says in plain English? And you look at this for a second and you say, well, first of all, why are you talking to me 1 a.m. on 42nd Street? Let's say you stop and you still talk to them anyways. And you say to them, yeah, that's a class. I'm creating a new class called person. And it takes in 2 different parameters of a name and an age. The default of age is 0. And then the second part is I'm instantiating a new instance of that class, a new person, and providing the values of Luke Skywalker and 53 years old. Brilliant. Now, what if I turned and said, what about this? And I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, that doesn't look like what that looked like before. This is a different programming language, but I think it's the same thing. I'm creating, it's object-oriented programming. I'm creating a class, and it's taking in 2 different values, a name and an age, with a default for age, and a default for name is an empty string. And I'm creating a new instance of it with Luke Skywalker and 53 years old. Now, the first instance was Ruby. The second instance here is JavaScript. Does it matter that one was Ruby and one was JavaScript? Not really. Does it matter that you're going to become an expert in JavaScript or an expert in Ruby or an expert in Python? And through those expertises, you're going to learn the constructs of things like object-oriented programming and error handling and test-driven development and other skill sets. That's what matters. Because if you can translate this, then you can learn syntax of languages. Because as a software developer, you will change languages or frameworks that you're working on regularly. I started off my first job, it was all about PHP. I was working on a PHP application and a lot of MySQL databasing. Tons of SQL statements and tons of PHP. My next job was all about JavaScript and Ruby. And now I'm working a lot with Python and TypeScript. I just keep on switching because the syntax, well, that'll take some time to learn, of course. But once you understand the fundamentals, you can apply them to the unique syntaxes of different languages. That's the key thing when you're first starting out. Pick any language. It doesn't really matter. Most software companies that are hiring you, they'll accept interviews in a number of popular languages. Just learn the concept so that you can quickly gain the skills in the syntax of that particular language you need for, and that competency that you need for that job. So to recap from the perspective of the individual contributor, your CV is not a liability. It's actually a strength. If you reframe what you did into what you were called, you think more about the skills and make that leap obvious for the hiring manager or the recruiter who's looking at your resume. Be humble, but again, in that tension, don't be a doormat. learn the difference between humility and meekness, and focus a lot on the concepts of software development, more so than any one specific language or framework, because languages and frameworks come and go, but the concepts, for most of the time, most things stay the same. Now, when we move on to the manager has a whole different set of challenges and opportunities than the individual contributor. And in fact, the power differential there is a lot greater, which is why when we start talking about the manager, I often like to start by framing what I think is the best kind of management style for this purpose, which is servant leadership. Nelson Mandela very beautifully and eloquently said, "It is better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory." So, and that is the definition of servant leadership. Lead from behind, celebrate the victories of those in front of you, celebrate the success of people who report to you. And that test of that is especially when there's something that happened that's great on your team or in your division or your organization, and you as the manager don't take the credit for it. You let your reports shine when you do that. Because if you want to gain credit for yourself, and this is a bit of the challenge a lot of managers face, is they want to be seen as successful, like we all want to be seen as successful. But how does a manager be seen as successful? What is success for a manager? That was not a rhetorical question. I just needed to take a drink. What is success for a manager is making their reports and enabling the success of their reports. And the more you lift up everyone else in your team, the more the managers that you report to as a manager see you as successful and lift you up. That is often a hard transition, especially for new managers, but that's the key. That, in a nutshell, is servant leadership. So in addition to servant leadership, a manager often needs to keep constantly in check their own sense of ego and understand that actually the best thing they can do for their team is to hire people with variety of experiences, people who both know more than them in the specific domain that they're hiring in. You want to hire experts, but you also want to hire people from different backgrounds than you, different perspectives than you, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, different gender backgrounds. You do that because the more perspectives you have on your team, the better your team is and better it will be in being able to adapt and change and respond to different product needs and respond to users and to customers and to external communities that use your products, because the external communities don't all look like you. The external communities are going to look like everyone else in the world, including you, but not only you. So having people on the team who represent all the different perspectives helps you build the best that you can possibly build. If you want to build the best product, make sure you have the widest spectrum of humanity that you can possibly have reasonably on your team. So to do that, though, means that you need to adjust your entire hiring pipeline. I want to share with you basically the two mainstream hiring pipelines that currently exist in software. What we'll call path number one starts off with the question: did you start coding when you were 8 years old, when you were 7 years old, when you were a little kid? And then they fast forward to the whole process if you answered affirmatively, and congratulations. Awesome. You got the job. You've been coding for the past 15 years. Amazing. You're welcome to the team. The second path looks a little different, but similar. Did you go to college? Oh, yeah, you went to uni. That's amazing. I'm so happy you went to university. But did you graduate with a computer science degree? Oh, you did. Oh, that's great. Do you also like living and sleeping in the office? We really, really value 18-hour days in the office. And don't worry, we'll give you breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks. And there's a comfortable bed and meditation rooms. It's going to be great. Just spend 18 hours here. You'll love it. Oh, you do love that? That's amazing. Congrats. Welcome to the team. These two paths have been for years the common pipelines for hiring into software. But friends, that pipeline is fundamentally, and I don't need to tell you this if you're in this conversation, that pipeline is fundamentally broken. It is broken in every possible way. But you as a hiring manager, if you're sitting in this conversation right now, or you're going to watch it later, and you have the power and the responsibility to be a hiring manager, you can help fix this. And you can help fix it by asking yourself all the time, what doors do you open? And what does it mean to open doors? Well, where do you post those job ads that you make? Where do you put those requisitions that you're opening up? Do you put them only in certain job classifieds? Do you only share them in some forums and not others? Are you aggressively going after and recruiting from people of underrepresented minorities? Are you really making all the outreach you can possibly make? And if you're not, and if you don't even know how to answer that question, then you're probably not opening every door possible. Don't expect people who come from non-traditional coding backgrounds, second career developers, people from underrepresented minorities to come and open the doors for themselves. If you want to make that change, if you want a team that's going to be more representative and therefore make better tooling and better products for your users and your customers, then you better well open those doors. Because if you don't open those doors, then you can't be surprised if your products are going to be subpar because they don't represent the diversity of the human experience. So to recap from the manager perspective, it's really about an orientation of how you approach management. If you come at it from the lens of a servant leader, where you see your success as inextricably bound up into the success of those that report to you, and you understand that your job is to hire people that are not like you, in both skill set and in background and in every other way, then you can really help move things forward in great ways. And you can do that by really broadening your hiring pipeline, by opening those doors, not expecting the doors to be opened, but being proactive. Going out to the places where people are, going to where people actually are, the coding boot camps, the self online study places, going where everyone is, and opening those doors for them, saying, I have a requirement open. I have a role open. Would you be interested in this role? Here is the job. And let me tell you, it may have all these bullet points on it for all these requirements, and that may seem daunting, but it's okay. If you don't match all of them, apply anyways. Because bullet points on a job ad are never, ever like an absolute hard must that it has to be 100%. You can apply if you don't meet all of them. In fact, hiring managers are expecting you to meet all of them, but you don't know that unless someone tells you. So someone's telling you. Hiring managers don't expect you to meet and match every bullet point in a job ad. It's more like a wish list than an absolute requirement. This all can seem very, very daunting. But I often think back again to another part of my tradition, which is taught to us that it is not your duty to finish the work, but you're not at liberty to neglect it. So the work can be overwhelming. Creating and carving the paths for ourselves as individuals as a second career developer, creating and carving the paths in our institutions and our organizations when we have hiring responsibilities can seem like an uphill battle. And every day we can leave work at the end of the day feeling we didn't fully accomplish it, either for ourselves or for our teams and organizations. But we have to nonetheless continue to try, continue to pursue it each and every single day. Thank you so much. I really am grateful for your time and attention. And I would love any conversation, any questions you may have. Please put them in the chat. I think you can also say them, if I'm not mistaken. It's my first time using this platform, so I'm learning all the tricks of it. But yeah, if there's any comments. Jessa Min. Sorry, just 1 second. Jessa Min had a great comment here. I'm just reading through the chat now that they said that they remember that reading once that people do their most innovative work in their first decade at a new job. Doesn't matter your absolute age, just that you have fresh perspectives. I think that's entirely true. Tommy commented that walking both paths is especially tough. It is tough. You are totally, totally right. Yes, someone was voicing something verbally.
Okay, hi, Ben.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so my name is Tunde. Yeah, I'm viewing your presentation from Nigeria currently.
Hello, Tunde. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm transitioning into software development, and I went to a boot camp and I completed it, and I did it since let's say 2 years ago or thereabout. But it's been crazy, you know, applications to jobs has been crazy. I just feel it's skewed in the sense that, okay, for example, you get to apply for a job, and yes, somebody eventually responds to you and gives you a task that I would consider daunting, in the sense that, well, maybe people don't know what we have to go through in this part of the world to get things done. We'll get it done actually, but it takes a lot to get this done. And I feel those things, those take-home assignments or whatever it is, are just things that just been placed before us. I just feel I'm sorry for I'm going to generalize now, yeah, but I just feel that things are skewed against us Africans than any other people in the world. You find out that other people in the world get more jobs faster than we Africans, because yes, I did the boot camp with other people and they have jobs wherever in their different locations and they're okay. But I don't feel that there's this opening towards Africans or jobs for Africans, and you know, it's not going to take me down. Yes, I'm still doing stuff that I love to do. I still do. I mean, I still do web development, and currently I'm taking a project for a local thing. I mean, for a local tech company. But you know, the question is just that, you know, why are things skewed that way? Why wouldn't people just open up? You know, if you say we are doing remote, yes, come on, give people a chance. Who says that person can't perform? Who says you can do? You know, so that's what my question in all this.
Tunde, thank you so much, first of all, for sharing your experience and taking the courage really to share that experience in this public forum. And I just want to sit with it for a moment, because I and none of us live in your experience, because each of us live in our own unique experience. And my heart goes out to you. It is challenging. And you face your own unique challenges, as we all do. I heard some of those stories as well when I was recently at a conference in Kenya, in Nairobi, and I'm really sorry for what you're going through. And I think I would hope, and I don't, this is just my hope. It's anecdotal. It's entirely based on my own desire to see a place where now we move to more remote globalized work, that parts of the world that have traditionally been underserved in opportunities would maybe be able to be more served in those opportunities. I don't know what else to say to that. I'm just really sorry that you're going through that, and I hope that it is able to be overcome for you at some point soon. On the first part you raised, whoever is talking,
they're there
for a minute.
All right, cool.
Can't mute you.
No, they're not.
Carrie, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you. On the first part that you raised, which was the coding challenges that you often get as a junior software developer or as a new software developer coming to the job, I so personally resonate with that. It was one of my greatest points of frustration when I was first looking for my initial role. And I think I kept a spreadsheet at some point of all the places I interviewed at. I was living in New York City at that time, and I think I interviewed for like somewhere around 170 roles, of which many of them ended up with take-home assignments, and they were so frustrating, because hiring managers often didn't understand the difference between a take-home assignment for a junior role versus a take-home assignment for a more career level or senior role. And you know, you have to do the best you can do in those take-home assignments. And what I've learned, though, beyond that kind of generic cliche advice, is if you can't solve it, if you can't solve the take-home assignment, there's two things here at this moment, at that inflection point. Either the take-home assignment was utterly unrealistic, and in that case, you probably don't want to work there to begin with. Now, that's really hard to hear when you're desperately looking for your first role. You don't want to neglect anything. But there are toxic workplaces that even for the first role will be horrible to work at, and those are often red flags. The second thing, though, is if the job coding challenge is within the reasonable range, but it's especially tough, instead of giving up and you can't solve it, what would be most interesting for that interviewer to see is your thought process leading to where you ended up at. Meaning, I'm stuck at this point, whatever that point might be, what might be my next steps here, and document those next steps. How would I look this up? What would I do? What do I think might be the next paths? And give clear reasoning in a well-formatted document, because that tells a lot about how you think. And if I'm a good hiring manager for a junior role, I'm actually looking more for somebody about the way they approach problems and the way they think about something than necessarily their ability to quickly and easily solve coding challenges in a take-home. So that advice took me a long time to learn, because I often felt like I needed to solve the challenge end to end, but they weren't actually looking for that. In the same way that a job ad with all the bullet points is actually more recommendations than a one-for-one, you have to have all those bullet points, and no one tells you that until you discover it. In the same way, coding challenges, they're not always meant to be solved end to end. They're actually meant to reflect your way of thinking and how you approach problems. But no one tells you that. They should tell you those things. So I'm telling you that. And so really think more about the problem solving than if you get stuck, and document it, than trying to feel like you need to rush to a solution that you know is not correct. There was a question by Oliver. Any recommendations as to where we can learn the concepts? So actually, there probably are places to learn the concepts specifically. And actually, one of the best books, I think, for object-oriented programming, as an example, is by Sandy Metz. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but if you Google Sandy, S-A-N-D-I, next word, M-E-M, like Mary, E-T-Z, you'll find her book. It is a classic book on object-oriented programming, fantastic book about the concepts of object-oriented programming. But instead of finding materials that teach the concept specifically, what I find helpful for me, and this is, I'm going to caveat it with, this is for me, and all of us learn differently and in different ways. But so for me, what was helpful was to take the normal things, Free Code Academy. I went to Flatiron School, which as my coding bootcamp several years ago, the curriculum there as well, which actually does a lot of the talk about concepts. That was very helpful. But what was to take the lessons around a coding language, like let's say you're learning JavaScript, and they're teaching you about something around JavaScript, like how to do X, Y, or Z, to, instead of speeding through the lessons and learning the syntax, learn the syntax, but also think for a second to break down what's happening in that syntax. Think about what you're doing. And the more you think about what you're doing, what you're actually doing is understanding conceptually what's happening under the hood, so to speak. And you're taking, lessons around syntax and diving deeper into them, which will be very, very helpful. Next one. Nansamba wrote, I don't seem to be able to find open source project that I understand as a beginner. I built many projects with Udemy classes and bootcamp, but I don't understand the open source projects, which seem to be a requirement on applications when you don't have prior industry experience. That is a really good point. And I want to that point tell you that open source projects require contributors in a variety of spheres. One of them is code contributions, which can feel very daunting, but an equally and sometimes more important contribution to an open source project is documentation. And what I mean is a lot of open source projects are poorly documented. They lack a good README, they lack good tutorials, good helpful guides. So if you find an open source project you are interested in, maybe something you've used in one of your coding school projects or your own personal projects, and you come to its open source repository on GitHub, and you see that it's lacking good documentation, take the initiative, reach out to the maintainer and say, hey, I'm interested in maybe adding some guides for this, as a user. Take that initiative and build those guides. It'll be a great way to learn how to talk about software, which is a very good skill set in interviews. And documentation is just like communication with other elements of the business, like the business side and clients, is really important. Learning to document your code is a very important skill that hiring managers look for. So I would also look in that area if you're finding code contributions open source to be daunting. Next question was from is there a certain type of role that people like us should be applying for, or a graduate junior role is the best option? I am an advocate of the idea, apply for everything that looks interesting to you and let the recruiter or the hiring manager disqualify you. Don't disqualify yourself, let them do that work for themselves. You apply. If you think it's an interesting company, you've heard good things about it, you think the role is fascinating, you might want to work with the people there, the technology, send in the application. The worst that happens is they don't get back to you or they reject you, but let them reject you, don't reject them for you. Don't do that work for them. Do it. Let them do it. William, as someone self-taught looking for my first role, I feel divided between trying to build relationships, applying to jobs, and building my portfolio with no idea how to prioritize things. Oh, William, that feels so resonant. You're bringing back a lot of memories between so many coffee dates with people in New York City and constantly working on portfolio projects and applying to jobs. It was endless. I don't know if I have any quick and easy advice to strike that balance, although you do need to strike that balance. And that's going to look different for every person, how you strike that balance. But those are building relationships, applying to jobs, and building your portfolio are kind of the three keystone areas. And you do need to be able to strike the balance between all three of those. Yes, the book was Practical Object-Oriented Design by Sandy Metz. Thank you very much. Beautiful. Ali shared Intro to Open Source, firsttimersonly.com. And let's see here. Amoba, as a tech newbie from a finance background transitioning to software engineering, how do I keep my knowledge of software development while transitioning into data science? Presently, I'm comfortable with the MERN stack, but would be transitioning to a data science master in September. Would not like to lose my knowledge in software development. How can I learn forward while not letting my knowledge of software development rust? Keep at it. Keep on building things that are interesting to you. Contribute to open source. If you have a software skill set currently and you are a developer, find an open source project that's interesting to you and get involved in it. That's a great way to keep both your interests alive, pique your interest, and keep your coding skills alive. What's your advice from Mike for someone wanting to move from software automation to software development? Depending what type of software automation you're involved in, it can be either easier or harder, but ultimately it's the same thing we talked about in the presentation, which is to take the things you did and abstract them for the job you're applying for. So what were the skills in your specific roles in software automation that you think are applicable for that role as a software developer, and do that work for the recruiter? Don't make them make the imaginative leap. Do it for them. An alternative, which isn't discussed much, free code camp. I prefer it to Code Academy. That's great. Whatever works for you, I think is key. We, my friends, are at time. These are fantastic comments, fantastic questions. I have so enjoyed our time together, genuinely so, and I hope we can actually continue the conversation. So you can find me on Twitter at Rabbi Greenberg. It's on the last slide there under the thank you. Please, let's continue talking online on Twitter and continue the conversation there. And I really want to wish each of you, if you're in the role process now looking for that first role, the best of luck. I think it's a challenge, but anywhere that will have you will be lucky to have you, because of the unique skill sets and unique perspectives that you bring to the work will only greatly enhance those teams. So really, the best of luck to each and every single one of you. Thank you so much, everyone.